You attended council hearings in person. You tuned into our televised proceedings on Channel 13. Now, you have the chance to listen to us on the radio as we demystify our work and the people who do it. This is not a council hearing. This is Hearing the Council with your host, Josh Gibson.
Thank you, deep voice person with a funky backbeat. Indeed, this is not a council hearing, this is Hearing the Council. You can't have a government without a council, so you can't have a government radio station without a council show. This is it. I'm Josh Gibson, Director of Communications for the Council. You may also know me as the Council's voice on social media at Council of DC. And today for our show, we are very lucky to have back a guest who has not been with us for some time, and we're grateful to have her back for an interview. And of course, our guest today is at-large Councilmember Anita Bonds. So thank you so much for coming back on the show, Councilmember.
Well, thank you very much, Josh, for having me. You know, around these parts called the Wilson Building, you are an icon, and you know that. So, and you know, some of us, including myself, you know, we're not always excited to be before you to discuss anything, but you know, here we are today, and so I'll do my best to talk to you about a couple of things that I think you might be interested in. And one is this very lofty subject matter called return to the office in order to get your work done. And as you and I know, and most of the city is aware, that the meat and bread of our government is our tax base. And that's how we make sure that all the services that go into community can actually happen through the revenue streams. And one of the areas that's been hit the most is the city trying to recover from the pandemic. And it really required us all to be away from the office. And these office buildings have just not they're kind of vacant now. I think we're at a vacancy rate of a little more than 22% still. And that's unheard of in the so-called nation's capital, Washington, D.C., our hometown. We're just not used to that. We're used to everyone wanting us to build, and to have more office space available. So, but we're here today, and it has a dampening effect on our government and what we will be able to do moving forward, unless we can get the offices to open again with people in them. Just this morning, I was over at the Reagan building looking at space, and, you know, I was disoriented because it seems like where I would go to the food court had somewhat changed because there were no people there moving around. And so I'm like, oh yeah, there's all this space here. My goodness, you know, really recognizing it for what it is now. But downtown is flourishing if you look at the occurrences of tourism. But if you are saying, are these people going to work in the buildings downtown? No, they're not. And it is really having an effect on us. It's going to affect, you know, the real estate taxes that we collect as it relates to our commercial sector, of course, but it also affects our restaurants and our cafes and coffee shops. We've actually had more than 300 of the small businesses in the city to close their doors, and so it's having an effect. And we've got to adjust to this new normal, and adjusting to it means that not everyone will be in the office 9 to 5, 5 days a week or 9 to 9 in some instances, I believe. But the point is that it's a new day. And how do we adjust to the new day, and what should be the concern? And I mention this to you because, you know, my committee is responsible for conducting a hearing on this issue as we move into 2024. So I just thought I'd put it out there. I don't know if you will receive comments from the public, but let's hope that you do, because that could also help inform us.
Yeah, I mean, it is I think it's a very well selected topic for the conversation because it is so complicated. You know, I was before the show thinking through pros and cons of work from home, trying to break it down from a city standpoint and from a employer and an employee standpoint. And you can't deny that the downtown is not as vibrant as it once was, that it feels empty. The businesses downtown are struggling. Metro is struggling. Those are undeniable, and those hurt the city. The challenge is the flip side from the employee standpoint. There's so much upside. Even if we got to a work from home through a terrible, deadly pandemic, there are clearly upsides for employees to work from home in terms of not commuting, in terms of increased time with your family. I'm not sure if people have measured this, but our neighborhood-based businesses, I think, are probably doing better than they would prior to the pandemic, in the sense, I live in Adams Morgan, and there's a lot of lunch restaurants. And during the day at lunch, it was kind of deserted in Adams Morgan because everyone was at work downtown. I haven't asked them, but I'm guessing that maybe the neighborhood businesses are seeing a daytime bump since a lot of us are at home. And what I don't know is that sounds kind of like a tie. Like, you know, the employers are hurt and the downtown is hurt by not having people downtown, but employees are helped, I think, in a lot of ways being home. That's a bit of an impasse. So how do you break that tie in a way that's fair to the city, the employers, and employees?
Well, you know, you make fair judgment on this issue, and I do believe in, like, a neighborhood like Adams Morgan, you may see that the small businesses are definitely surviving, in fact, doing better than usual. But you know that commercialism is not a given throughout the city's different neighborhoods. You're lucky. You're in a neighborhood that has it. But in many neighborhoods, we don't have that. Emphasis has not been placed on providing the amenities at that level in communities. And so while some will do better, hopefully, I think by and large, most businesses are feeling the effects. And that's why it's such a big issue for us, because, you know, really and truly, when we look at our taxes and what fuels our government and therefore fuels the programs that we have in community and available to our residents, you've got your personal income tax, your property taxes, commercial and then residential, and then your sales tax. Those are the big buckets that we look to. So if you don't have the businesses to collect the sales tax, that's one thing. If you don't have the businesses, you can't collect the commercial, you know, property tax. If you don't have the businesses, maybe even some individuals are moving other places, then you don't have the personal income tax. And that's why this this issue is such a deciding factor in community these days. Downtown, you're right, that's one part of us, but the city as a whole seems to have some difficulties with getting the resources in as we once were able to do. So what do? Well, I think you have fair judgment when you say that there are some benefits to working from home, and employees are not excited about coming back, even with the big industries like what is it, Amazon. They're getting a little kickback. You saw what happened with what is it, UPS. Now, if you work for UPS and you're a driver and you're finally back on your job and you're 174,000 is what you can expect as your income package, and so that's all income and benefits. That's all very good, but it does change the face of a community like ours, that depended so much on the real estate world. And so what are we going to do? I know that the mayor has asked, and even the president of the United States says, come back to work, federal employees, because that has been a big part of the traffic that we've had in the city, the downtown area in particular. Well, some are listening, some perhaps are not listening. And so what does that say about us, the local government? Are we at a point where we're going to be pushed to downsize? Or are we going to find another way to manage this? There have even, I read a few studies, people have suggested that even the salaries of employees may be affected ultimately. So I'm just suggesting that, as you say, this is a tough subject. It is a very complex, tough subject, but we've got to handle it. We have to handle it because our community has to continue. The community of Washington, D.C., the people of D.C. and its government.
Yeah, it's, I mean, this is why policy is so complicated, because there's just so many perspectives and ways of looking at it. But it just seems to me the two communities are talking past each other, because the government and the employers are saying this is an existential life or death question for our government, that we can't live without this revenue. We need the people downtown. But the people and individual employees are speaking from a quality of life standpoint. And it seems like there's no adjustment in the government or employer mindset to speak to the hit on quality of life that employees are going to take. But employees, you having your work from home job only works if your employer is still in existence. And if they're not in existence because of the kind of real financial struggles you're talking about, your work from home job won't help, because that won't have a job or an employer. But how do you, when two groups are speaking totally different languages and totally different, very real, non-negligible arguments, but they're talking straight past each other? How do we? I know you haven't had your hearing yet, and you'll know more once you hear from a bunch of witnesses. But I just struggle with how are we going to get these two totally different arguments to align?
Well, I know that we will hear from those that say we must return to the days prior to pandemic. We must do that, which means we have to come in and on a regular basis. And then we're going to hear from those that say, well, okay, it's now time for us to figure out how to live within our means. And if our tax base is down, let's say 20%, revenues are down, and therefore we've got to figure out what is it that we must do in order to keep government moving forward, in order to have the revenue to take care of the necessities. And some of those things that we thought were really wonderful, we may have to let go of. And I know this sounds like, wow, you can say, well, okay, Anita Bonds, you are and have been a very strong Democrat. And of course, the Democrats like to make sure that people have not only what they need, but some of the things that embellish their livelihood. And I do too. And that's where I'm coming from. But I think we will be at a point where we have to deal with the realities of our resources. We don't have many places to get the resources for running our government. And that's what I'm beginning to look at. Sadly, it's the truth that we may have to face. We'll wait and see what the hearing says, of course. And there'll probably be individuals that are coming from, both, sort of in the middle, perhaps. Maybe there'll be some outstanding and new ideas that can surface, and that we'll be able to entertain. But it is a issue that we must deal with, or it will deal with us ultimately, is what I see.
Right. It's yeah, I mean, I think, punitive measures saying get back to work or else, like, I can't see employees responding well to that, but I know that finances are tight for a lot of businesses. An easy way to get people to come back would be every day you were in the office, you get paid 120% of your normal pay. If you work from home, you get 100%. But I know that finding that money to provide an incentive to get people to come back to the office.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you something we've done in my office. We have a modified kind of schedule. Did an survey of which days are most active with visitation from constituents, and came to the conclusion that we have a modified schedule for 3 days of the week, Mondays and Fridays. They're almost like half days. And then we add time in the middle of the week. In fact, we've started a process where we have what I call open office on Wednesday, 5:30 to 7:30. Anyone, anywhere who needs to come in will be here, at the council office, or as we take it into community. So I think that if you kind of jazz up your schedule, it might have a way of bringing about some refreshed approach to doing government. But that still doesn't get us, to how do we get all this money in that we were depending on, and still able to do everything. We recognize there may be some reductions in some of the programs that we have in this government.
And you're in I think, a unique spot on the council in the sense that you have oversight over executive offices, executive agencies. The mayor has brought her workforce back fairly full time, going back months. Whereas the council is still, each office makes each listeners might not realize that each council member has their own kind of executive authority over their staff. So each office makes their own hours, but I think many offices are still doing a fairly liberal work from home. So you're seeing the intersection. You're overseeing agencies that are back fully, but you just explained your own office is kind of a hybrid model. Do you think the council needs to be more aggressive, needs to follow the mayor's lead and get more people back in the office, more hours?
I believe that the council will probably be more nimble. And that is that the offices will sort of take the temperature of their constituents, and of course their workload. That's always number one. How do I get all the work done? Like, for instance, when I chaired the housing committee, I think I had about 13 agencies to be concerned with. very dynamic agencies, nevertheless. Now it's about 30. So it's the workload is, and it's very challenging. We also have, well, in addition to so-called back to work in the office issue, we have requirements to do other things. I have the accountability agencies within the committee, the executive administration and labor. I have the labor agencies, particularly those concerned with collective bargaining, the PERB, those kinds of things. I have the Board of Elections, and we're going to have an election in 2024. Want to make sure that everything works for that, particularly given the heightened interest in elections, this year and next year, as it will continue. So, and I have seniors, our precious seniors, that want to make sure that they have the resources that they need, and that more seniors feel comfortable looking to government to assist them to age respectively in our community. So those are kind of like the big boxes that we have, but there are a lot of boxes, and it seems like all of those boxes are in play at one time. So it's pretty challenging.
Yeah, I bet. It's interesting because you mentioned elections, and elections are another example of something that were changed by COVID, that in real time, the government had to react and change how elections were run. And again, it was a sad cause that led to it, but a number of the innovations that were made will probably stick around. Voting by mail, even if you're not an absentee, that kind of thing, drop boxes. So in the case of the elections, I think the Board of Elections seems to be deciding what helps turnout. Turnout's their ultimate goal. So that's how they're going to make decisions about what do we keep, what don't we keep in terms of COVID era election reforms. So the question is, with work from home, how is anyone looking at whether the work product is better or worse? Are employees more productive at home? Are they doing better work or worse work from home? Because we talked about revenue impacts, we talked about quality of life. The one thing we didn't talk about is the work getting done, and is the work getting done well? And I that's something we need to figure out how to measure that.
You're right. Well, there have been a few recent studies that indicate that working from home does not replace working in an office environment with others, because we learn from each other. We perfect from each other, our skill set. And so there's a strong argument that working together and being able to read each other's body language, as an example, is very, very beneficial, or the most beneficial. And I tend to look at that as a guiding post, at least for what I'm trying to do in my office with my team. And I'm hoping that there will be others that will be interested in that approach. It's a difficult call, because if you speak to individuals, inevitably you're going to hear from a lot of folk that say, I'm more productive when I am at my home because I don't have the interruptions. I don't have people stopping by my desk. But there are others that will say, oh, but I need to feel that I'm in a group, and that we're being competitive, and we're producing, together, and it's like our project. It's our production, as opposed to what I have as an individual to contribute. So I think that I tend to believe us humans to be social animals. And so I think that we do want to be near and around and participating with each other. But we'll see what the hearing has. It should be pretty interesting. I hope that it will be, and very truthful, forthcoming about the situation.
Yeah, I was having this conversation with someone the other day, and the analogy that I was using was, you know, microwaves versus cooking things in the oven, in the stove. Popcorn, you used to take forever. You had to get pans dirty. You had to pour oil. Took forever. Made a mess. Burned easily. Like, then they invented microwave popcorn, and it's like a couple minutes. It's easy. It's fast. It's clean, and the net result is basically the same. So is work from home the equivalent of microwave popcorn, where it is the same thing but without all the effort and fuss? Or is it like microwave pizza, where you're never going to get a pizza out of the microwave? It may be pretty good, it may be not bad, but it's never going to equal what you'd get out of the oven. And that's what I don't know the answer to from a work standpoint. Is it the argument you were just making? Is it's the pizza side, that unless you're in the oven doing the extra work, if you take shortcuts, you're going to get a lesser quality work product. But I think a lot of people would say it's the popcorn. I can do the work anywhere on earth. I'll be happier. You'll get the same work product. And I think that's going to be the debate for the age now is, do we get similar work from the different venue, or is there something intangible we lose, which is what you were saying?
Well, Josh, I guess if we were to really look at this long term, for me, I can see if we continue working from home, I think the nature of the employment will change, and maybe different kinds of tasks. Currently, many of our service industry employees, they do the transit system for us. Well, if I'm going to stay home, maybe I don't need the transit system. And that's one of the things that has happened lately with WMATA. WMATA is possibly will be operating at a deficit if they don't get some infusion of additional hundreds of millions of dollars. And they're looking to the members of the Interstate Compact, Maryland, Virginia, DC, the metropolitan area of Washington. But we in DC, we don't have the money, perhaps. We don't have that kind of money. Now, I understand that Virginia has a huge surplus, so much so that their governor is looking to do, he wants to reduce taxes. Maryland has a surplus as well. I don't know what they're going to do, but my point is, because they have the money, are they going to put DC's share in? I don't think so. But we could very well begin to pull back on some of the service industry jobs. And that takes me to particularly our unionized employees. What happens with that? And our president is saying that the infrastructure, the new funding for infrastructure across the nation, 90% of the jobs that will be created, you do not need a degree. So here are the people wanting the jobs. The jobs will be created, but will they be created and how will they be used? And so that's why I think this whole situation, calamity almost, it's complex. And we have to think about, where does what we are doing today lead us tomorrow? And how does it affect our young folk who need to get into the workforce, and to have a life as well, in their adult life? Yes, I can see that everyone wants to be a surfer or a skateboarder, but not really, because sooner or later, the limbs won't do it, so to speak. So you've got to, everyone wants to have their trade, their craft that they can do, and rightfully so. So we have not advanced to where we're just saying, oh, that's no longer necessary and we all can be laissez-faire. We haven't advanced to that yet as a society on this globe.
Yeah, and I think, like you mentioned, service jobs and infrastructure jobs, they're not having the work from home, work from the office debate, because those are jobs you can only do with your own two hands in person. And I think for a long time, people might have looked down their nose at some of those jobs. But now, in a world with artificial intelligence and outsourcing and everything else, and these, debates about whether you can work from home or you have to come into the office, seems like a lot of the best jobs are the jobs you do with your own two hands, because you can't send them away. You can't, you got to show up and do the work every day. But they're very tangible, real jobs that knock on wood aren't going anywhere.
Well, we know that some of the jobs that we are doing today are definitely going to change as our society evolves. For instance, when you look at electrification, we have electric vehicle stations, the servicing of all of that. That's a job, which we hadn't thought about, 10 years ago or 15 years ago. And so when I look at the labor situation in the District of Columbia and the fact that we have, I think, a good almost 30,000 jobs that DOES and the other agencies within DC government are aware of. These are jobs that are there, and every week there's a jobs fair, and we're asking people to come out and to apply for these jobs. Well, okay, come out and apply for these jobs, and we want you to have these jobs. But sometimes we don't get as many as we thought, and most of the time we get too many for one job. But we've got to speed up the process to give people who want employment and who are willing to work the opportunity to work. And I think that leads us to some of our situations with the occurrence of violence in the community, with people not knowing that there is the land of milk and honey here in America. At least all the commentations say that, and you see it and you want it, and if you don't have it, you're going to figure out how to get it. And I think that's some of what is happening in our community. So I'm very focused on any DC resident who wants to work, who's willing to work, to have the opportunity to work and to build a career. And so that's what I think I should be doing with the committee that I chair and through the processes that we have in the government. And I think we need to put more emphasis on that. And we have to hear from the people saying, this is necessary. This is how I'm going to get, affordable housing. This is how I'm going to make sure I can take care of my family or my household. That's what we need to be focused on as well.
That makes sense to me. So we're starting to run a little low on time, and we generally tend to end our interviews with a bit of a fun round.
Okay.
And we've done this once before. Basically, I'm going to name sort of a silly, fun task to you, and I want you to tell me which of your colleagues, it can be a present colleague or a past colleague, you think would be best suited to that job and why. Total just stream of consciousness, whatever seems to make sense. So the first one is going on a camping trip. Which, if you had to go on a camping trip with a colleague, past or present, who would you pick and why?
I think Zachary Parker, and I would pick him because he is quick to take action. And so if we're there and bears are coming out, he will know which way we should run.
That seems like good analysis to me. Now, how about if you needed someone to mediate a dispute? If there was some sort of thorny neighborhood dispute, you of course would be involved, but who would you bring to your side who you think would be good at mediating a dispute?
My goodness. Maybe Matt Fruman.
Okay, and why do you think Councilmember
Um,
would do well?
I feel like he is listening with 10 ears to subject matter and always taking the temperature. And so I think he would he would be insightful in his thinking about what is occurring.
Okay, that definitely sounds fair. Whose Rolodex, if you could borrow one council member's Rolodex, one council member's contacts, who do you think is well connected and that you'd have a good resource if you could tap into their contacts?
Well, I think Louis George, because I think she would have an exciting Rolodex, variety of people, personalities, and it would be fun to get to know them.
Okay, very good. Two more. Last one, if you were on a 1-800 call with customer support and they were giving you trouble, you weren't getting anywhere, and you needed someone's help to get it done, to get satisfaction from whatever 1-800 number this is you're on the phone with, who do you think could cut through the nonsense and get your business done for you?
I have to let you know, as Chair Mendelson, it would be Phil.
Yeah,
yeah, it would be Phil. Yeah. By the time he asked foyer of questions, the person would be worn down to
worn down to submit and give you a
yes. Oh my goodness.
And the last question, which is a particularly silly one, was assume all of your colleagues write poetry, which I'm guessing they don't, but assume they do. Whose poetry would you want to read? And it can be none of the above. It can be a past colleague. It could be just the thought of their poetry might be too painful. But if you kind of could see and just through their poetry,
it's not that the poetry would be painful. I'm just trying to think of interesting poetry, and probably maybe, believe it or not, maybe Charles Allen.
Really?
Yeah, see what I mean?
What's the motivation there?
Josh, I want it recorded that you said, really?
Oh,
yes. I mean, yeah, I think that would be interesting to see his poetic verses and his feeling about life and any subject matter like that. Yeah.
I'd be there for that. I would 100%. And anyone's poetry you would run like the devil from, who you couldn't imagine enjoying their poetry. Anyone come to mind? Or
oh no, I'll stay away from that.
I figured people generally don't answer that question, or they say the chairman, which I think is a pretty fair bet that, I'm not sure where I'd come down on his poetry.
Yeah, he would be pretty interesting. Yeah.
Yes. Well, we're definitely out of time now. I appreciate you having fun with the silly questions at the end. But again, I'm so thankful to you for taking the time to do this. And listeners, I just want to remind you to subscribe to our podcast on SoundCloud or wherever you get your podcasts. Just search under Hearing the Council. Thank you again for joining us, council member listeners. Tune in next time. We're on DC Radio at 96.3 FM on your HD4 dial or at dcradio.gov. I'm Josh Gibson. This is not a council hearing. This is Hearing the Council. Thank you again, council member.
Thank
Really,
you.
have a good day. Take care.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.